Hello, everybody, and welcome to Gays of Our Lives, queer people playing queer games. And this is the Punk Pride Pixies Debrief. Like dice to the dice tower, these are the gays of our lives. We are a group of therapists, educators, and spiritual leaders playing queer tabletop RPGs in order to embrace our identities, build community, and share the magic of playing queer games with queer and queer adjacent people. Gays of Our Lives streams every other Sunday from 4 p.m. to 7 p.m. Central Time. We will play queer games with queer characters and then talk about our experience. Want to know how to use games to build space for your queer clients? Check us out as we discuss, that's today, how each game can benefit the queer communities we work with. Now I turn you over to our game master, Tennille, to bring us to the next step.
Hello, everyone. So glad to have you here for the debrief. I will briefly go over the game system. Punk Pride Pixies is a queer, feminist, anti fascist, and anti capitalist game written by Steffie Devon. Pixies are communal people who share most everything and don't have a concept of private property. When they would grab things for safekeeping, humans considered it stealing. This put them in conflict with humans for centuries, so the pixies went into hiding in the forest glade in the center of the city. And the humans forgot that pixies were real and believed them to only be fairy tales. Pixies still exist, causing mischief, but they make attempts to not draw too much attention to themselves. Punk Pride Pixies is a one-page game using one six-sided dice and three attributes called Punk, Pride, and Pixies. And you can find the game available on itch.io for $2. I want to thank Steffi Devon for saying it is okay for us to show off this wonderful game. It's been a blast being your game master, and I'm super excited for us to really dig into this game. There is an announcement. Is there an announcement? Should we talk about what our next game will be? Maybe we'll leave that for later. Oh, there's going to be Save Against Fear. Save Against Fear will be next weekend, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. At Start Playing Games, we'll have the link in the chat room for you guys. There will be games to play, fantastic games to play, and panels. Lots of wonderful things to learn about, and merch stores as well. So definitely take a look at that. Um, let's see. So today things are going to be different because we're doing the debrief, and we're going to start with actually just introducing ourselves. So let's start with Hallie.
My name is Hallie Palmer. I'm a licensed independent clinical social worker. My pronouns are she and her. I work with children and adolescents who have experienced crime related trauma. And one of my passions is working with the LGBTQ population and people with ADHD as well. Um, and I played Calamity.
Would you
All
like to
right.
popcorn next? Oh, we'll just go on to Maggie.
Yeah. So I'm Maggie. In my real life, I'm known as Mary Dvorak, and my pronouns are they, she. I am a licensed marriage and family therapist, and I work right now with all ages and families and couples, as well as individual work. And I played Shaylee, also known as Shay.
All right, and let's have Jesse go next.
Hi, I am Jessie Duncan. My pronouns are she, they. I am a licensed professional counselor. I primarily do individual therapy with people of all ages, and I focus a lot on trauma and ADHD.
And now Menachem.
Hello, my name is Menachem Cohen. I am a spiritual director, rabbi, and tabletop game designer. A lot of my work is in the design and use of role-playing games to work with people on spiritual growth, exploration, and healing. I also love working with seminary students and new clergy, doing spiritual direction with them to help them become great spiritual leaders. And I especially love working with queer seminary students.
Fantastic. Wonderful.
My pronouns
Um,
are he, they, I forgot.
Okay, cool, cool, great. And I am Tennille Evans Reno. I have my own business called Journey Group Therapy. I've put it in the chat room for you guys to take a look at. And it's specifically for members of the LGBTQ community. I started working with the transgender population and have a huge, huge passion, respect, and love for the community so that they can use role playing games to explore their identity. So this is totally in line with everything I love. And I'm so glad to be the game master of our series of the gays of our lives. And I'm so glad to have everybody here for the debrief. So let's start with our first question. As we're just gonna go into questions, and some people are gonna answer, some people are not. I might chime in a few times. We'll try to bring it into more of a conversational place, but we'll just see how it goes. So the first question is, how is this game queer? So yeah, Menachem, why don't you go first?
So I think this is a question we're going to, thank you. I think this is a question we're going to ask every time. And, you know, an important one, given this is a stream about queer games and how they can be used in the queer community. So I was thinking a lot about this. I believe this game is queer in the way that cartoons and movies were queer in the 90s and the aughts, right? The Steffie says this is a queer anti-capitalist game in her descriptions of all her games, but in the text of the game itself, it doesn't say anything explicitly queer. But in the cartoons and such, things were always coded queer. And if you knew what to look for, you would see it. And it goes all the way up through things like Legend of Korra, right? Korra and Asami. If you have the eye for it, you see, oh, they're going to have a relationship, but they weren't allowed to say it. But and they were actually, it was confirmed later. But so it's queer in that way. There's nothing explicitly queer about that. And I think that's a powerful way to do things. The other way of doing queer games and queer shows is that you can say, we're queer and your characters are queer. And, you know, the setting is queer and the mechanics and the rules and the art and the advertising is explicitly queer. And there's value to both of those. This game, I think, with the value of making it not be about queerness, but be about fae. And really, we know that the fairies and the fae have long been coded as queer in popular media. So it's kind of there for us also. But it allows us to say, this game isn't about this, and we can explore things with that fictional distance, an extra step of distance between the subject matter. It's kind of like the X-Men comic book, right? It is a story about mutants being oppressed and persecuted because they're mutants. But if you don't see that it's about racism, right? And the stuff that was going on in America in the 60s and 70s when the comic was first created. So this game works like that it takes it to an allegorical level. That's my answer for this question.
Awesome. I feel like the game is queer because the character sheet is so different, you know. All you're looking for with your character sheet is what your role is in the group, your personality, and an item on your person. It doesn't ask what your gender is. It doesn't ask what your sexual orientation is. It doesn't ask if you're in a relationship or not in a relationship. Um, and so I really appreciate that because not having that, it means it can be whatever you want. You can include it if you want to, and you cannot include it if you want to. I was really glad to see Menachem's character have a gender that was amator, you know, where it was like, I don't, what's a gender? I don't get it, you know? And that was something that you could do in this game. In other games, I mean, you can make games whatever you want it to be, but the structure of the game doesn't allow for that in many games. And this game, it was in there. And so I really appreciated that. Hallie, I think you had a comment.
I think that the parts that speak to me as being queer are the fact that the community has to be secret, to protect the community, because I think that's definitely a choice. Thankfully, we've come a long way, especially in the United States, but there's still, you still have to know if it's safe to talk about your sexuality or your gender identity if it's not the typically accepted sexuality or gender. And so I think that is has like, it definitely speaks to the queer experience a little bit from like a very PG-13 standpoint. Like, we're not going into depth here. I think that for some people this is probably going to get into one of the other questions a little bit. I think that in some ways this might not be queer enough for a lot of people, just because there's no requirement that it be explicit. And for some people, they really want to explore this because they want to explore um, the parts of themselves that they haven't been able to express as much as they would like to. But I think that overall, like, I really like the anti-capitalist and part, and the community has to be quiet, like they have to be a secret. And I think it speaks a lot about found family and creating your own community and family that you feel safe with. But like, it's going to leave a bit to be desired for other people, but ultimately it is queer.
Awesome. I love that. That's a very good point. Like the fact that the community is secret, in a way highlights queerness in itself. Um, okay. Menachem, did you want to say anything more on that?
Oh, if no one else is ready, I was just thinking, when you fill out like forms in the real world, there's a couple different choices that could happen when you want to be LGBTQ competent in your agency. Sometimes it says gender and leaves a blank line, right? That kind of describes what Tennille said. It allows you to put whatever you're in, or to leave it blank if you want to. Also, sometimes you see gender and sometimes race also was this, and it has like 12 to 15 choices, right? So there, and speaking of what Hallie said, there's a value sometimes in seeing yourself represented that way. So there's two different ways of addressing queer games.
Nice. Very good point. All right. I'll go into the next question. How do you think this game can help people embrace their queer identities? Can it help in coming out or accepting who you are? It sounds like Jessie has a response for this one.
Yeah. Looking at this game, and especially in what we were talking about with the mechanics being more open, more fluid, not having to define what is, I know with some of the clients I've worked with in some of the group therapy, just having that freedom of, okay, time to just explore what's here, say what I'm feeling, what I'm doing, what I'm noticing, jumping into whatever character, and then realizing, oh, I did this choice because this is how I feel about this. Oh, this is something I didn't think to explore about myself, about my identity. And now having this character I've created who's engaging in the world in a way that I might not necessarily be allowed to in my day to day life, I'm noticing these things and I want to explore it more. I want to learn more about myself and how I'm engaging. And so I think having this game like not have those like limits in that way, you can explore these things within the character and see what happens.
And I believe, yeah, Maggie wanted to go next. Go ahead.
Yeah, so kind of along the same lines as Jessie was saying. Um, I, when I was growing up, I engaged a lot in compulsive heterosexuality and femininity. And so it didn't even like dawn on me that I could be queer or not a girl or a woman. And this game really like made me stop and think like, wait, who am I? Like it allowed for that opportunity to really create myself in a way and like really seek what my identity really is rather than have to be stuck into some some shape that somebody else designed for me. And so that's what I really appreciated about the game, is that I could feel free to like play around with that and play around with identity through my character. Um, and then can it help with coming out, accepting who you are? In those ways, I think that's how it can be helpful with that, because you do get to just be you. And throughout the gameplay, and I think there's a lot of opportunity uh, for others to like be really affirming. And so if I was running this as a therapist, there's things that you can do with the NPCs to affirm people. And I don't want to get too much into other questions, but yeah.
Absolutely. Hallie, there was something you want to say?
Yeah, I like what Maggie just said about like growing up and forced heterosexuality and gender norms, and or compulsory, I think you said. That's a good word. I think that for this game in particular, because it's such like an approachable topic, it's Punk Pride Pixies, like it's fairies. I think that this could be a really accessible way to introduce sexuality or gender to a younger person, whether it's a child or a teenager. Depending on the family culture, you might not be able to do this, but because you always have to have the consent of the parent. But I think that this is a really nice way to start out for someone younger, especially because it's really easy and approachable mechanics. It's can be pretty lighthearted. You're not necessarily explaining the trauma that LGBTQ community has been through with this, and you're not preparing for a child for that, but you're helping them in a safe way explore their gender and sexuality. So I do think it could be really useful for younger populations.
Nice. Yeah, I really loved how I mean, it sets up that you're in a pixie community. It's a community. So everybody, you already go in with everybody already knowing one another in some way or some capacity. Um, and that's not always set in other games. And so there's a lot of space for love and acceptance. And that's just like that's my perspective on the game when I saw it. And that's what I think queer community should be, all about love and acceptance, right? All right. So our next question, this one can get a little bit more personal. Did this game help you embrace your queer identity? Any thoughts, Menachem?
Sure. I would say yes and no, because I played a character who like sexuality and gender like were not concepts that the commodity understood or even thought about. So that doesn't fit my personal sense of sexuality and gender. I'm very invested and interested in my sexuality and my gender, and I've spent decades in exploration of them. But it was really fun to like take them out of the equation for a while. When I was playing a pixie, sexless, genderless pixie, you know, and wasn't interested in romance, intimacy, or sex. So in that regard, it was delightful to kind of play this character who was, I guess, ace, and I don't know what the word, I'm blanking out the word in a corresponding word in gender, but to play this character who this wasn't a concern of theirs. So did it help me explore? No, but it helped me feel that freedom and some excitement in playing that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's a huge list of ways that your character could have identified a gender as. I mean, a gender kind of like comes to mind more of like androgynous, but it could really be anything, and there's like so many gender identities.
Thank you. I had a brain fart. I couldn't remember agender.
Agender, maybe, yeah, maybe they were agender, asexual. Yeah. Any other thoughts? Oh, Maggie, go ahead.
Yeah, so I was a little bit similar to Menachem, where I think my queer identity I've been exploring for a long time now. So exploring this game didn't like come to me at the time where I really would have loved it, which gets back to Hallie's point of this could be really great with young kids or even just a younger population. But embracing my queer identity, absolutely. I found it fun to just be able to be me and not have that judgment around me. I think that partly has to do with the game, but partly also has to do with who I'm playing with. You all are very accepting, lovely group. So, so that made it safe as well. I think it's important for everybody to think about who am I playing this game with and what, like who's jamming and all of those types of details too. Interestingly enough, this also helped me explore more of my gender because I identify more as non-binary or I think it's Audi gender, like how autism relates to gender. And so I was found situations that helped me do that as well.
I think that the more games that I play, the more I feel more connected to the community, understand the community a lot more. You know, as a child of someone who's queer, um, there's definitely a different perspective I have. Um, just because there's like judgment towards someone in your family, even though it's not directed specifically at you, but you're connected to that person, you know. Um, so in many ways, that person is a part of who you are. So when they're judging your loved one, it's like they're judging you, you know. Um, so I feel like being able to play different NPCs that had different genders and had different orientations just helped me to like embrace more of that queer community in my own way, which is wonderful. Um, so our next question is, how do you think this game can help build community? Did you experience any sense of building community as a result of this game? And it looks like Jessie has a response for this one.
Yeah. With this game, I really like the fact that building a community is part of it in how communal pixies are, and that we had to go through and figure out what our roles within this community is and how we interact with each other and how we know each other, and especially having the siblings of Calamity and Commodity and seeing that dynamic play out of just like we are here, there's something established, like even with my character Olette and Commodities friendship of just mischief and just seeing, okay, how do we how have we interacted before the current thing that we're going to do, and now we're jumping into this new story. How are we interacting? How are we building connections? How are we all like interacting with each other, especially with Shay, and how Shay was more quiet and didn't really connect with everyone before the mission and then after, and seeing how this has changed, and also just seeing how we have come together as a group and how this group of players are and how we now can interact with each other in our gameplay. And so I think it was a really good in having that built in and then working with that and exploring how these dynamics work.
Fantastic. That's a very good point, and that's just something I want to point out is that, you know, Shay as her character being like a shy character, it Shay ended up talking a lot more than I think Shay had expected at an episode, and it was
Yes.
wonderful. It was wonderful that there was space for that. That's a beautiful thing. I believe Hallie has a comment on this one.
Yeah, I think that the game does set you up to have community already just with the characters, and I think that also like the cast gamers community in general, which that's a bit redundant, but still the way I said that, like we've all gotten to know each other more, and I would say that through this game as well, we were able to connect more, and it was interesting. I really liked the your role in the group part, like, and that kind of gave us an idea of how they might act. And so Calamity, like she started out as like the reluctant leader, but I think that Shay really stepped up. But also, like I would say, since she was a confidant anyways, since they were a confidant, that they were both natural fits for different types of leadership. And Calamity might reluctantly be the leader when no one else wants to step up, but maybe she really doesn't want to be the leader. And I think whenever you figure out how people are connected at the beginning of a tabletop game, that's just going to naturally make your characters just feel more alive and connected to one another. This is the first time I had a sibling in a game, and I did really enjoy that. I am an oldest child, and so having a little sibling was by 17 months or 17 years, we don't quite know.
Years.
um, it started out as months. I'm pretty certain. We'll have to go back. But I think that really helped it feel more real. Like I started having a vision of like commodity living in a wasp's nest and just like what it was doing to me physically. And Calamity, just I could just feel like how nervous Calamity would be about their sibling living like that.
I mean, the wasps weren't there anymore.
I know. Still dangerous.
It's still a wasp nest.
It's a fire hazard.
Whatever. It was a blast playing siblings. I mean,
awesome.
And we were twins, but you were 17 years older.
Months.
But it was so much fun. And I'm an oldest child too, so to play a younger sibling was fun to do. And I think it's accurate. I can say that since that game, Hallie and I talk more. We chat more on the Discord, and our friendship has grown more. And I've played for a year and a half with Tennille, but I hardly had played with Maggie, Hallie, and Jesse. And so I feel like I've gotten to know them better as friends and people, not just people who are around, but like they're my friends now because we played this game with this silly Punk Pride Pixie family. So it built community. It bled. We had some bleed, which is a game term where things affect the real world. And we have better community now because of this game.
Absolutely. And it's good to hear. It sounds like Hallie experienced bleed. I'm not sure if are you familiar with that term?
Oh yeah. I'm a therapist. I know what that is. But I do think that like in general our community, like plugging our community, I think that first of all, just everyone already involved is just so genuine and wonderful. And I think that's why we really wanted to do Gaze of Our Lives, because we were playing a game where we got to explore our sexuality and our gender. And it just felt so nice to be to be surrounded by so many wonderful, affirming people. And so, like, I can't say enough great things about the community in general, but it's also great to be around people as an ADHDer who, when you come up with an idea, there's 20 other people who are like, let's do it. Like, that's a great feeling in a community. Yes. So, and yeah, there's bleed.
Absolutely. There's research that shows that when a group of people are listening to a story or creating a story together, the same parts of their brain that light up all connect. Like this part of my brain lights up, this part of your brain lights up. And that happens like in the whole group. And for me, like I just see that as a way of bonding, and it's a beautiful thing. It's, it's a tribal thing. It's a raw, wonderful thing to see. Okay, so our next question, was it magical for you? Was this game magical for you? What was your experience playing this as a queer person or queer adjacent person? Maggie, why don't you go?
Yeah, this is super magical. I mean, I could have pink hair and sparkles and fun wings. I just loved it. Uh, so, what was my experience playing as a queer person? While I was having fun, and I totally agree to the community part, there were some points where I was super anxious. For example, when they were having the bonfire and Ollie came, and I was somewhat under the impression that her dad didn't know um, that she was queer. I was like, oh my gosh, is someone going to be outed? And I think for anyone who has experienced being outed in a non-consensual way, that could have been uh, triggering or just kind of difficult. Um, we didn't end up going there, but I think Tennille, you did a really great job of keeping it more lighthearted, which feels more true to the game, which goes back to everything we've already said about like this is a game that allows us to be very lighthearted and explore things in a safe way. So yeah, that's what I was thinking.
All right. Hallie, looks like you've got some words.
Just assume I always have something to say. But I don't always need to say it. So was this magical for me? For a second there, I was going to say no, but then I remember the feeling when we took a break during our first game and we were just like all smiling. And I was like, oh my goodness, this is such a wholesome game. And it's really silly. It's super wholesome. It provides so many opportunities for just fun play. And I do think that that is magical. For me as a queer person, like so I'm in a heterosexual relationship but I identify as pan, and I was able to explore a little bit of asexuality with Calamity, but it wasn't really necessary for her to have, like, at one point someone was like, oh, if you're into them, like, you could ask, and then she's like, I'm not really, that's not really my thing. And because I just didn't see her really needing a romantic relationship or sexual relationship, but she wanted companionship. She wants friends, and so it definitely puts her in like the asexual community. And like so I got to explore that a little bit, and like I'm playing around a lot with femininity, that word, being feminine, and just due to a lot of things that have happened over the pandemic. And I did get to explore that a little bit on camera and through Calamity, I would say. Um, so like I've been able to explore it a little bit more, but I'm excited to see what future games we have in store for exploring these aspects.
Awesome. Awesome. I think that's a very good point, and that's goes back to an earlier question regarding somebody being able to use this game to explore their own identity or their own gender. So if they were thinking, maybe I'm non-binary, or maybe I'm asexual, this could be a game that they could play and just explore a character like that and see how that feels, if that feels like something that fits them, or if that's something that they want to keep exploring. So very good point, Hallie. Thank you for sharing. Jesse?
Yeah. Um, I also felt that this game was really magical in that it felt so lighthearted in a fun way and like lighthearted and silly, but also still just like the stakes are important, the things the characters are going through are important, and it's just fun to let go. And in terms of like exploring playing as a queer person in this, like with Olette, my character, I would say she was definitely like asexual, probably, and like non-binary, agender, somewhere around there, which is, yeah, which describes me as well. And I think, yeah, this is the first time I've played a character who matches me on those things. And so it was really fun to just like explore, okay, this is a game in a setting where I'm not going to overthink everything. I'm just going to have fun and see what happens as I'm playing with this character, because this is the purpose of what we're doing here as a community with Gays of Our Lives. And so just having that freedom to explore and just see what happens was a lot of fun, and like really influenced a lot of my choices, in that there were points where I was like, this is a bad idea. I shouldn't do this. And then I did it anyway. So
Excellent, wonderful. I thank you so much for for sharing your experience, Jesse. I really appreciate it, because it's definitely making me look at this game in even better lighting, because it's wonderful that the setting gives so much space for you to not be in a relationship, for you to highlight friendships, highlight sibling relationships, highlight any type of relationships that you want to highlight. And that's a beautiful thing. And I believe Menachem had a comment to make too.
Yeah. I mean, it was magical in that getting to be obnoxious and carefree was a blast, because I'm not obnoxious and carefree in my daily life. I mean, I will get in a car and go on a road trip on a drop of a hat, but not as much since I've become a parent, and that whatnot. But it was magical in that regards. As a queer person, I did want the game to be more explicitly queer. I mean, I wanted the game to discuss more queer things. But the fact that the game didn't ask for gender, right, and left that at that blank line expression, allowed me to do things I might not have done, and gender or sexuality. It allowed me to play it in a way I might not have done if it had been an explicit "you're a queer character" game. But so while I wanted to be more explicit, I found value in it not having being explicit.
When you say that you wanted it to be more queer, like what would that have looked like for you?
Explicitly queer.
Explicitly queer.
Like I wanted the introduction to talk about the queer experience. I wanted the choices to reflect different queer identities. I wanted there to be, I don't know, maybe even mechanics, but I don't know, like some games have mechanics around relationships and identity. I don't know but I wanted it to say, we're queer. This game is queer in the text of the game itself.
Gotcha. Okay. All right. So our next question is, what you like the most about this game? And I guess I'll answer while you guys are thinking about it. I like that it was one page. That makes it very easy for me as a game master uh, to put it together. I love that there was a great structure in place, but that I can pretty much add whatever I wanted. I really wanted to focus on bringing in elements of the Pixie community and the Pixie lifestyle, but also allow the players to enjoy that and make it whatever they wanted to make it as well. So that was a lot of fun for me. I just love Pixies. I just so I what I think I liked the theme the most, for sure. Maggie, you want to go next?
Yeah, and I totally agree with you. I loved being a pixie, being able to fly, being able to just have fun. I think one time in the game I knocked over a glass of water. Like that is something that I would never do. And I was able to do that in this game. It was wonderful. And I did also appreciate that it was simple enough that like there was only two rules that I had to remember, because I get so stuck on rules, like with something like Dungeons and Dragons. I want to know everything, and I can't. So this one I could just jump in and play and have fun, and so I appreciated that.
Fantastic. Yeah, it's nice when things are so simplified, and I think that simple games like this are very easy for people to jump in and try role playing even for the first time, just because there's not much to remember. So that's good to hear. Menachem, your thoughts?
Yeah, something that just came up was even for a one-page game, there's potential for campaign play in this game. At least we could have played for 3, 4, 5 times longer than we did, right? Because there are plenty of little, even the prompts on the page give you, 7 or 8 adventures you could go on. But going back to the idea that there are only a few choices to make, right? A few rules. And when you picked your role, there were 6, your personality, there were 6 choices. Clearly you can go off the list. But when there's that few choices, it kind of like forces you into something that you may not have thought of before. Right. And a lot of how I think games work in the work I do and that we all do is because we're playing a character, we can say it's not me. We can use alibi, which is the game term. It's not me, it's my character doing these things. And that allows us to explore things and try things out that maybe we feel embarrassed to do or too shy to do, right? So the forcing you to pick from a small list and pick things you wouldn't have thought of, I think can actually help alibi and give us that bigger fictional distance. Say, it's not me. I'm none of these things. So I'll just pick one and try it. So the game gives you that sense to really get outside of your own perspective, outside your skin, without giving you so many choices. And I have to say, I love having punk as a stat.
Nice, good. Yeah, I liked punk as a stat too, and pride as a stat, and pixie as a stat. It's just like it's really interesting, really very simple. One die makes it very easy, so you're not trying to figure out like, oh, what dice do I have, and what do I add, like, is it 4, is it 6, so it's the mechanic is just a lot more simple. I'm curious if anyone else would like to answer that question of what they like the most about the game. Jesse or Hallie?
Yeah, thank you. Um, I did really like that you use a d6 to play, like just having a simple 6-sided die, because that's the die that's in a lot of like board games or other kinds of games. So it's more likely that you'll have that around to be like, okay, I can play and just like grab this, as opposed to like having to go and get like a ton of dice to play like other tabletop games. And I think for especially with working with younger kids, it's something they can like more easily get and understand of like, oh, dice roll like this. This is how you go about and do it. And so I like that simplicity with it. And I did like how you could, for character creation, just roll the dice and pick like your personality, because that's what I did. And then I was like, oh, this is great. This is perfect. And how exactly I want to play this. And I didn't have to think and come up with something beforehand.
Nice. Hallie, did you want to answer that one, or should we go to the next one?
Yeah, I think I'll echo what some others have said. I like the accessibility. Like if you were in a session and you were like, you know what, I think this is the perfect time to use it, you might have it already printed out, or it would just be very quick to print out. The other person wouldn't need to know the rules, wouldn't like you would walk them through it and it could be very simple. And I did really like the character prompts. I think that maybe there could have been more. Like the item on your person didn't really use that, and also like a pixie holding a spork. That seems difficult. That like Calamity was kind of. I don't, like I'll answer that in the next question, but yeah, I really liked Calamity and Commodity's relationship too. Like, but overall, the whole group was really nice. So that's like the favorite thing I had as a player.
Right. Yeah. I think you're right. Like when I'm looking at these items, like some of the items seem a bit big for a pixie, like a can of beans.
How do you carry
That
a can of beans?
seems like really big for a pixie.
Left shoe size 11, like
Yeah.
men's or women's?
A rubber duck, I mean, I guess it could be any type of size. Oh wow. Yeah. That
You
that's
can't have
pretty
that on your person.
that's pretty heavy for for a pixie to carry. And I mean the glue, I guess it could be like a smaller glue, or the rubber duck could be like a smaller
It was glue
rubber
stick.
duck.
It was a glue
Yeah.
stick.
It just says glue.
I made it a glue stick.
You made a glue stick. Okay, cool.
In my head, it was rubber cement.
And then picture of a cat. That's interesting. But yeah, they could have, I don't know, like matchstick would have been a nice item to have. That's,
or like a snail
small.
shell,
Or a toothpick. I mean,
Pixies
I
are
don't know.
strong.
Apparently. All right, so our next question is what you liked the most about your character, or if you had a favorite character. So let's start with Hallie this time.
Shoot, what was my favorite thing about my character? Oh, so I had an idea and then it left my brain. I think I really liked how I tried to play her as apathetic. Like I had the leader and my personality was easily bored, and that worked really well with kind of like this like too cool vibe I was going for. But it was clear that she really did care about her friends and family and like the community and solving problems. It was very clear that those were things that she cared about, but she was really trying to pretend she didn't. Like she was trying to be real cool. And I did enjoy that. I almost feel like we could have taken the item on your person and just replaced it with another personality question or something. I think that might have been more useful. But I do think it helped shape my character. So.
Now that I'm thinking of it, maybe it would have been nice to have a flaw list, to, I don't know, get a little bit deeper, or a value list or something like that. I like those types of characteristics because it just, I don't know, makes it more interesting. But you guys created characters with their own types of issues, all on your own, which are wonderful. All right, Maggie, yeah, go next.
Yeah, so what I like most about my character is that they spoke up when it really came down to like needing to speak up, or like really as a part of the game they were able to step up and talk. It does reflect kind of my real life, and what I'm trying to do is just unmask, because I'm such a heavy masker, as an autistic. And that also reminds me of my queer identity though too, is I guess I don't intentionally try to look or be a certain way, but sometimes we can present ourselves in certain ways when we're not in front of safe groups of people. And some of us have more ability to do that than others. And so that was just something that was interesting for me to think about, is how that relates to identity. But I really got to just be who I was and just like throw out there whoever I was with my character. And so I enjoyed that.
Nice, that's wonderful. Jessie, you like to go next?
Yeah. I would say one of the things I liked most about my character was the fact that they were the one who always gets into trouble. because it just was like, okay, this means I can do whatever. And if it ends badly, then that is in line with who this character is, but also was inquisitive and academic and got to be smart and got to know stuff and investigate things and just also still get into trouble. And then, like, another part of this was like, if you had a favorite character. And honestly, Shay was my favorite character because, like, in my day-to-day life, Shay is the one I relate to the most. And it's what I'm most like, of just like finding me sitting in a corner doing nothing or like just observing everyone around me. But it was really fun to see how Shay interacted with everyone and just, yeah, it was just really fun to enjoy.
Nice, wonderful. I wanted to create NPCs that all of you that could connect, and so there were like three main plots that we could have gone with, and so there was Nellie, Ella, and Bumble. Bumble had more of like a masculine type energy. And so it would have been interesting to see what he would have been like with the group, because he's very protective. He's a protective pixie. So that would have been interesting. Ella is a prankster, so I think if you guys had chosen the plot of where you were with the bumblebees, that would have been definitely interesting. There would have been a lot of hijinks. It would have been a lot more lighthearted. But I really liked being Nellie. Nellie definitely became one of my favorite NPCs. She just kind of wore her nervousness out there and just let herself be nervous whenever she was nervous, and she didn't try to hide it at all, because there was space for that, which is great. um, it was fun being Queen Berry Fig Sparkle. I worked hard on those names, so I hope that you guys enjoyed them and that they fit within the theme. And also playing Orla was fun as well. And Ollie was a little more difficult to play, but Ollie had, he definitely had a lot of different flaws and issues, but you guys saw that underneath all of that there were some goals and deep desires that he wanted, and I hope that that's shown through in the game as well. So that was pretty cool. Menachem, did you have any comments on this before we move to the next one?
And I think I already answered what I love playing about it and how I love playing with Calamity.
Okay, sounds good. Awesome. All right, so the next question: what you struggled with the most in this game? So if that was with the mechanics as a player, or if that was that your character struggled with something in the story, any type of struggle that like comes to your mind. Hallie, why don't you go next?
I think while I do like the simplicity of the game, I actually struggled the most with the mechanics and feeling like in some ways that there weren't enough choices, or or not knowing how to resolve a situation. Like I think like the situation with Ollie, like I mean it was in character for her to become easily bored, but she also kind of wanted to fix the situation but didn't know how, and like didn't know if it was a fixable thing. So she's like, I throw pixie dust, and like so there were, and then when you roll, it was very difficult to succeed. Very very difficult. It was much more difficult than you would think to have full success. And then if you fail, you may not, if you roll a 1, then you may not use this attribute again in this scene. So that was interesting. It didn't affect it as much as I thought it would, because other people could try things or you could try it a different way. But in some ways, the Punk, Pixie, and the Pride stats aren't as defined as I would love. I don't need it as to be as crunchy as like D&D, but if I were to, I think that I prefer this as a one shot than a longer campaign for those reasons. Because if I did it for longer, I'd want to have a leveling system to help incentivize things, like maybe so that maybe it's a little bit easier to get a success, a full success, you know.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting. That's good to hear. In our campaign, you guys brought up pixie dust. That's not actually on the sheet at all. So, me as a game master, I was like, all right, I'm not sure what that's gonna do. So but I let it be whatever it was going to be, like, in the moment. But you know what, that might be something that could be, interesting to, like, actually add that. I don't know if that would be like a mechanic, or if that could be an ability that people can use for a short period of time. Another thing I want to mention is that I don't think that you guys used your bond as much as you could have, but also I didn't bring it up. So it may have been possible. I know that we used it a few times, but I think that it was possible that you could have used it more, maybe. No.
I know we used it at least once in the last session. I do think that we didn't really know what pixie dust did either, and then I just made that canon, at least I did, that maybe pixies don't even know what pixie dust does. We just know it does stuff, like, and I
That
think
is true too.
that would be a pixie thing to do. I don't know, let's use this. Like, it's my
Yeah,
sparkle stuff.
right. And the on the sheet it does say that you can only use it once per game, but I don't know if that really worked. It was since we were doing a little bit of of a campaign type thing. So if it could have been like once per scene or once per session. Didn't really talk too much about that, but good points to make. All right, Maggie, like to go next on what were your struggles?
Yeah, so I have a tendency to take things very literally. And so some of the things I was trying to imagine and I couldn't, and that got me stuck a little bit. Like I wanted to know the size exactly of the pixies and like how strong they really are, like just little things like that. Um, it's kind of funny. Um, and then, oh, the rule was that we couldn't out ourselves to as pixies, right? I almost every time before we started playing, I wanted to ask Tennille, like, does that actually mean that we can't? Because I really wanted to. And so I struggled with, I think I got stuck on not being able to tell Orla because I really felt like she was a safe person and that she would have kept our secret. But I really struggled keeping that a secret.
Can I say something, like, in
Yeah, yeah,
response?
yeah. You can
Um,
make a comment.
I also really want to know our size because I'm like, sporks and cans of beans, like, how big are we? I
So you're
also,
you're about the size of a hand,
uh,
but everybody's got their small hands and big hands.
I got
So
tiny hands.
I've got small hand too.
Yeah.
So
But I also did not really like the hat and trench coat trick because, like, I felt like it was very limiting, and like,
oh yeah, with
and we
conversation for sure.
so, like, the not being able to out yourself, as well as, like, okay, if we're gonna be in a public place, then we need to kind of do this. And in my head, like, I was like, there's no way this would fool anyone, but I'm just gonna go with it. I'm just gonna pretend it's all fine. Like, but yeah, sometimes that rigid thinking, and I
Yeah.
have like a very not a phantaphasia, not that thing, but like the hyper version of that. Like, I can visualize things very easily in my head, in full color. Like, that's why I love reading and why I love gaming. And so for me, I just hate I that during the scene with Ollie, I really just didn't want to be in the trench coat anymore. I wanted to get rid of it, but we kind of didn't have a choice. But also, if we're talking about the queer experience, if you're in a relationship with someone who they're not out but you are, that is a similar situation where you want to tell people, you want to express your love in public and stuff, but the other person isn't there yet. And so I think that does allow you to explore that particular feeling, that particular dysphoria in a certain way. So,
Interesting. Interesting. Okay. I would say, Hallie, you're talking about the Punk Pride Pixie. I agree. I struggled with when to use punk, when to use pride, when to use pixie. Because some things, like, I feel like you could make a case for all three. So much of it depends on the person's intentions. So if a person could make a case for one or the other, then if it made sense to me, then I was good with that. But I think for a game master that, you know, wants to be really clear on the rules, is more of a rules lawyer type of person, would have some difficulty in figuring out like what goes with which. Also, I really left it up to the players to figure out, like, if they got a one, like, that they couldn't use it, because that was just too much in my headspace. I don't know, there's like too much that I'm keeping track of for me to like figure out, oh, they can't use this characteristic anymore. Because if we came across a place where you needed to use punk or pride or pig, I would just say it. I'm not really remembering whether you're able to use it or not. And then what if you're not able to use it? Then what? Do you use something else, or do you just can't roll? I don't know.
One of my GM guiding principles is convince me. Right.
Right.
If
Yeah.
I there are a couple of times where I say, can I use punk for this one because this? And you're like, yeah. So we had that interplay and a little bit of community building that way.
Right. Yeah.
yeah.
Did you feel like you struggled at all, Menachem?
I guess it wasn't totally clear always on your decision which one to use, and I wasn't totally clear always which one I should use. But I felt like I could make an argument. Of course, I wanted to use punk because that was my +3. So
Right.
um,
Right.
so that does affect how I would argue.
Right. Yeah. There is a part on the sheet where it talks about that pixies fight with cats and dogs, and I mentioned that like pet brutality is kind of like one of my lines. So I didn't include any of that in this game, and there's also like a list of scenarios, and one of them has to do with fighting a cat or a dog or something like that. um and I just didn't want that to be a part of the game. So someone who's playing this game for the first and might have issues with those sort of things might think, oh, how am I going to do this when, and I would just encourage that person to just leave it out, do whatever works for you in this case, because a safe game is a fun game. Yeah.
Could I say like one more thing?
Yeah, go ahead, Hallie.
I think that this is definitely a game that you play with people who are okay with being really creative, with not needing like a rule for everything. Like you're not going to play this game with people who need to follow like that you need a rule for climbing or swimming, or like you would need with more of those grittier game like crunchy games. This is a game that you're playing to create story and to get playing as quickly as possible, I would say. Uh, and for like the purpose of exploring a certain part of your identity or having fun. Like you're going to want to play this with people who primarily you're going to want to have fun and create story.
Yeah, yeah. I think it would have been great for this game to have a specific safety mechanic. I just put one in because that's how I do games. But there's not a specific one there. Um, and one other thing I wanted to mention with the complications, that was a little bit difficult. It would have been nice if they could have maybe given a little bit more structure on the complication, on what are some things that could happen. So I don't know. I mean, they gave an idea, but it was, I don't know. I would have liked a little bit more maybe like some different options.
I loved having complications. Made the game more funny and interesting.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, I think the thing about mechanics, safety mechanics, is interesting because a lot of people are talking now that safety mechanics should be worked into the mechanics and structure of the game, not just added on. But also in a lot of groups, these groups, we just put them in regardless of if they're in the book or not. We are already thinking about them, or the page in this case.
Right, yeah. Jesse, did you have anything to add, or should we move on to the next one?
I mean, not much to add, just a lot of what everyone else has been saying in terms of like the gameplay and the structure, and just having some issues figuring out how to proceed after certain roles, and like, yeah.
All right, sounds good. So, does anybody have like a favorite or most memorable moment that comes to their minds? Because I definitely have one. I'll let Hallie go first.
So for my character, I would say my favorite moment is failing to grab Orla's hair or whatever and falling down her shirt. Like, that sounds dirtier than it is. She fell down the back of her shirt, it's stuck there, and it was just ridiculous. It was a ridiculous concept that now everyone else had to figure out how to get this pixie out of this shirt, and there was like a hot dog involved. And and then I think my favorite moment for other people was when Olette pressed all the buttons and then couldn't be in the next game. I just feel like that's hilarious. Like, that is a very much like chaos, and then
My favorite moment is definitely when Nellie and Shay made the phone call. Shay spoke to a human for the first time. And they just rejoiced. They rejoiced in their pixie way. And like in my mind, like I imagine them holding hands and like spinning around and around, like pixie dust, like everywhere, like just giggling and laughing and having so much fun. And that was like, oh, definitely like the height of the moment for me.
I think that started our adventure towards riding squirrels together.
Yes, squirrels. Jesse, you have one.
Yeah, I think my favorite is eating the s'mores while we are still in the trench coat, because it's like just that image of a loose trench coat with a hat and two shoes, a s'more going down into both sleeves and both shoes, and like, yeah, just the idea of 5 pixies eating s'mores in a trench coat.
chocolate and marshmallow everywhere. Ugh.
Absolutely. Very, very much fun times. Menachem, do you have one?
I'm not even going to try and pick.
So many good ones, huh? Yeah. Okay, so our next question is, how did you feel about Ollie showing up at the bonfire? I thought we could process that if there was anything more that people wanted to process. I think Jesse wanted to go next. I don't know if you want to respond to the last question or that recent one. Either way is fine.
I can go. Just, yeah, it was a bit surprising that he showed up at the bonfire, because I thought Ollie we might have to deal with after everything with Orla, and like, because I thought it was okay, we're going to the bonfire, we're going to help Orla, and then we'll deal with Ollie later after we get Orla on our side. And so it was just kind of like, oh, it's all happening here. And this is okay, awkward. Orla's dad's here. Don't know how to navigate this, but we're going to jump in and do our best.
Were there any emotions that came up for you with that scene?
Like a lot of, mostly it was like, oh, this isn't what I was prepared to do. I guess I kind of have to switch tactics because it felt like as the Pixies, we were here to support Orla and here to help Orla with her journey, finding herself. And so, what can we do to support Orla? Does that mean we have to get Ollie out of here? How are we going to navigate this situation?
Yeah. Um, yeah, I had planned for Ollie to show up because I wanted to have a give you guys a little bit of a challenge. And I think it turned into quite a challenge for the group. And I hope it wasn't too much of a challenge. Um, but there are many ways that it could have gone. But he's definitely a little, I wouldn't say that he was like an evil character, but he's definitely an opposing character. That sort of thing. Maggie, did you have any comments?
Um, yeah, I guess I kind of did say what I was thinking about it before. There were a lot of things to try to juggle in this scene. So for me, what came first was, oh my gosh, she's going to be outed to her dad. And so then all of the other stuff in my head was like secondary. So I wanted to help her, but I didn't know how to juggle all of that at once. And if I'm remembering correctly, he didn't really have a reaction to that piece. Um, so it wasn't, so my initial reaction wasn't really necessarily even needed, at least with this story. But I do think that's important to keep in mind when having queer people is like when they're outed or when they're um, experiencing moments like that, because it can definitely bring up a lot, which could be very useful for therapy and a helpful way to process.
Yeah. I think the character was just so angry about his company going down and he just blamed Orla for everything. So he just wasn't really that focused on who she was with.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Thankfully. Hallie, do you have any comments on this scene in particular?
Yeah. I think that I think it was one of those situations where you expect a movie or a book to cover something and then you feel maybe a little maybe a little relieved depending on your perspective, but also maybe a little let down because it wasn't covered. And so I do think that if a situation like this were to happen and you're like, first of all, depending on the client you're using this with, um, you would need to be very intentional about whether there's any situation where there's someone being outed or not. And I think that really depends on your client's journey, where they are on coming out, and whether they want to like maybe preemptively problem solve or if they want to uh, almost review what how it actually went for them and maybe try to like in trauma work we do a lot of processing of what happened, but also sometimes depending on the client you might talk about how you wish it had happened and how it could have gone better. And so I do kind of feel like because we were probably all kind of like, oh goodness, this is happening, she's getting outed, and then it didn't happen, it did leave a little bit to be desired, especially from the queer experience. That is a real thing that queer people really go through. And then, so in this instance, maybe it would have been interesting to go there. But whether we felt safe or not to do it, maybe this game isn't the one to explore that with, because it is, I think it's intentionally more lighthearted. And that's not a lighthearted situation, especially if you're not ready for it. I don't know if
Right.
that made sense.
Yeah, makes sense. Makes sense. All right. And our next one is how has Punk Pride Pixies been a different game regarding its queerness than other role-playing games that you've played? Maybe Menachem would like to start in this one.
Reaching for the keypad. I think it's some of the things we've already discussed, but in a way that some games might have mechanics or social narratives set up to address the kind of situations like outing people. And it might have had, so if it was a more explicit game, it might have discussion in the game about issues that are clearly important or often important to queer people. And like if one of your clients was dealing with being outed, this game doesn't necessarily have, it's more, it pulls away from the game and more to the therapist or the spiritual director to start addressing it outside of the game context or on the fly as they're going.
Very true. Very true. There's I feel like this game gives almost like what I'm trying to come up with a good metaphor. I guess like you would maybe like the beams of a house, but the game master has to create the walls and the roof and the door and the furniture. It's a good frame, but it's not maybe enough to really help like get to as deep into it as maybe another game might.
But that's the beauty of one-page games, right? Is they do leave all this space and all this room for us to bring as much and as anything we want into it. So it's a balance between room for anything versus support in the mechanics and the rules for the issues that we're addressing.
Exactly. Yeah. There's pros and cons for both. Absolutely. Maggie, did you have a comment on that?
I don't know that I have a lot of experience to compare queerness. I guess the only other game that I played in any kind of queer lens has been Thirsty Sword Lesbians. And they're just very different games.
Very different games.
Very clearly queer game.
Yes.
Yeah. And
what about Exquisite Polycule? We played that one
I
together.
guess I did play that one, yeah. And so that one, well, yeah, that one had much more defined relationships or like relationship as a part of it. Whereas this one played with relationship and community in a different way. And I appreciated the different ways that each of them allowed me to play in that realm. Because this one did help like build community and safety, but it was more so like larger community around me rather than individual type of relationship, and both of those aspects have value.
Yeah, makes sense. Very nicely said.
And a game like Thirsty Sword Lesbians has mechanics and moves and rules for flirting, right? And for building relationships with each other. So there's a lot of that framework and then support, and there's a lot of the furniture in that game. So, do you want a furnished apartment or, an unfurnished apartment that you bring your own furniture to?
Right. Yes. I like it. Thanks for continuing the metaphor. All right. So the next question, how can you see using this in your practices with queer clients? Hallie, I think you have an answer for this one.
That was for the previous one, but sure. I think I've already answered this one a number of times. I did just want to say, yes, comparing Punk Pride Pixies to Thirsty Sword Lesbians is like apples and oranges. Like,
very true.
And we all were in that game that we had played, and it was Thirsty Sword Lesbians was such a it was just so, there were mechanics for all of these things, but you didn't have to be a lesbian. You could be anyone. but there were mechanics specifically for, yeah, having strings on people, flirting, declaring your love and exploring your feelings. And then Punk Pride Pixies, like, you can literally make it whatever you want it to be, but you're going to do more work. How can I see myself using this in my practices with queer clients? Like I kind of said before, I would use this either for clients that were really into fantasy, especially pixies or the fae, or and it doesn't have to be fantasy books, or it could just be any genre. And because that could be a really accessible way for them to explore this, or for our younger clients that also might be into some fanciful stuff, because you don't have to have a really strong understanding of the queer community or the history of the LGBTQIA community or anything like that. You can just come into this and be like, I want to explore whether, you know, whether this might be for me. Um, yeah.
Sounds good. Sounds good. Um, yeah, you bring up a really good point. I think if a person is not that interested in fantasy, this is not going to be the game for them. If they don't like small things, they don't, or that could be triggering in some way. They don't have an interest in that. This is definitely not the game for them, because it's very, like, the theme is very strong in this game, which I really played into that. Yeah, I think how could I use this in my practices with queer clients? I think this would be a great fit for transgender individuals who want to explore their gender identity, want to explore their sexual orientation. The framework is really in place so that you can really create whatever type of fantasy that you wanted to, whatever type of plot you wanted to, so that they can explore the things that fit for them. I could even see this being with just one client. I think you could do this with just one client, a one-on-one thing, where you just describe the setting and the NPCs and what happens, and they decide what they want to do and where they go from there. Could be a fun thing to explore for sure. Um, Anything else, or I think Menachem has a question.
Well, related to this, an example, when I was in college, we had a speak out once where 10 or 12 gay men and lesbians sat in front of the community and they answered two questions without interruption. One was, what has my experience been like as a gay man or a lesbian? This was like probably 1990. And then the second question they answered was, what do I never want to hear from the straight community? Right. So one of the things that's good for us queer folk is for not queer folk to have a better understanding and acceptance and love for queer people. So I guess the question I'm asking is, can we see this game being useful for cishet people, for people who are cisgendered and heterosexual, to help them learn what the queer experience is like, and then it makes the world a little bit safer and better and more loving for us queer folk?
I think so. Um, I would love to use this game for a family, especially if, there was an individual client who had came out in some way or identified in some way that was difficult for the family to accept or support, and they had an interest in fantasy and like these sort of things, that this could be like something that they could explore and see in a different way. um I think that would be pretty cool. I think that would be helpful and therapeutic. Hallie, any thoughts?
I liked I always have thoughts, but whether they're worth saying or another story. I do like that idea of using it to with a family, because I do think that especially caregivers or other siblings of someone who is exploring their gender or sexuality or just identity in general could benefit. I think I would have to do some thinking about whether it would be whether this would be the game that I would play with someone who's cishet, or I think that there might be another game where I could explore this a little bit more, like
Thirsty
just
sword lesbians.
maybe, but like I'm just kind of trying to think that honestly maybe, but that has a lot more mechanics. So
That is
I
true
could
too.
use it. I just have to kind of think about it because there might be for me, it would depend on whether the client is in need of something like this. And it's not necessarily my place to judge. So, like, while I would love to run a cishet client who maybe could expand their horizons a little bit more to understand the queer experience more, that isn't, it's not my job to make judgments on their personal views. Because I'm their therapist, and I have to have radical acceptance. Like, do I have to condone certain thoughts and behaviors? No, but I I can't, like, that's not what my job in that space is to do as a clinician, as a therapist.
Very true. Yeah, yeah.
I agree with that, Hallie. I do think that this game could be played and not be seen or as experienced as queer. So if you had a cishet person, they could just love fairies and want to be a fairy, and for them not experience it in a way that they saw as queer, whether or not we do. Uh, like pride even can be taken in different ways. Uh, so
True, true.
unless I read like this is a queer game and there's things done to make it queer, I guess I could see it happening in different ways too.
Thank you. Thank you for your thoughts.
And and I guess going off of that, it could also depend on how we set up the story and the world around it in terms of like what's going on and happening in that world, and using it as a way to challenge certain things that the clients might assume, like with cishet clients where it's like, oh, it's like this because it's always like this. And so presenting a world that challenges that has something that's completely different, and they have a different normal and a different standard. And that can be a way, even if we're not necessarily as explicit about it being a queer game, with certain clients being like, let's see if we can create a world where things are different in this world, and what the baseline is something different. What would that look like? How would you explore that? Is this something that you would be interested in learning more about, and going from there?
Nice. So we actually have a listener question.
A human?
Yay.
Is it from a human?
Yes, it is from a human.
Whoa.
I mean, we don't know.
Well,
We don't
okay.
know that they're human.
Are you,
That
listener,
is
are you
true.
a human?
So the question is, if you could add one mechanic to make the game more explicitly queer, what would it be?
So this might not be like, I don't know. Part of me really wants to make this over the top gay. And I think that the way to do that is to give pixie dust a mechanic and like use your pride pixie dust to do something. And it would probably be related to being gay or just LGBTQ. But that would be pushing it, like that would be kind of leaning into like the kitschiness of the idea of punk pride pixies. So whether that is something that would be a good idea to do or not is another question. Um, but like, I think that using your pixie dust to make something happier and more gay would be pretty awesome in this game. And like, I'm sure I'll have other ideas, but that's my first idea.
Awesome. Just wanted to say the listener mentioned they are not a human, they're a pixie. So
Hello.
welcome
That's
Welcome.
okay.
Pixie.
Welcome, Pixie.
Welcome, Pixie. All right, Maggie, you had a comment on that question.
Yeah, I was thinking something like seeing rainbows or like and that could be done in a
Nice.
lot of different ways, like if the character could choose to see in rainbows, like what would that look like, and maybe that would be a way to help them see like a path forward, um
Ooh, I like it.
like
I
traveling
like
down
it.
the rainbow. Yeah, yeah.
Yes.
Or if it's a similar to like the pixie dust, where we could make other people see rainbows and find happiness with their queerness. I just had to add the queerness.
Fantastic. I love it. I love it. I love those ideas. I just keep thinking of a game that is now on Kickstarter, Queers RPG. And they actually use a mechanic called rainbow empathy. And so when they come across someone who's ignorant, who, is anti-gay, is against, um, people like that, then they use their rainbow empathy to unlock the psychology of what's going on and to open them up and get them to see, hey, gays are awesome, and turn them around. And I just think like, wow, that is beautiful. That is beautiful. So if you guys haven't heard of that game, like definitely pick it up. I'm already like at the top tier because I'm like, yes, I want all the things. It's just beautiful. I just, the idea of rainbow empathy is just a beautiful thing. But they would of course have to come up with something that fits more for Punk Pride Pixies, and not, totally uh, take away from that. So yeah. Menachem, you had a comment.
Well, how to make this game more explicitly queer. Perhaps one or two of the personality bits could have been like Butch Dyke, or something, terms that
Oh
are obviously
yeah,
queer words that have a whole lore associated with them.
absolutely. I love it. I love it. All right. So I feel like we've talked a lot about like many of our questions. I feel like we've answered. I am curious if there's anything more that you'd like to say about your experience playing Punk Pride Pixies. Any other thoughts? Any other moments that you wanted to highlight or um, address? All right, Hallie, go ahead.
Um, so at like this is my first cast stream that I've been in. My first stream really I've done like one other stream and it was a panel. Um and so first I really enjoyed being a part of it. I enjoyed helping with the art for it. There will be some more artwork for our next stream which we'll talk about in a bit, but I think that it was a really nice friendly introduction to streaming for me, and I really like the idea of Calamity, so I think she's going to come back at some point in a different game at some, like maybe, I don't know, some days I want to be more like her and real cool, but I know I could never be that cool. And
Calamity and Commodity may reappear somewhere in another game.
ooh, the universe. Um and no, it was just really great playing with all of you. I like our it'll be fun mixing up our groups and stuff, but it was a great experience. Thank you very much to you.
Oh, fantastic. It's a great experience to have all of you play and share your experience and participate. All of that is beautiful. All right, Maggie.
Yeah, so in some of our discussion, both before, during preparation, and during this stream, we've talked about like, is this quote unquote queer enough? Um, and for me, I think that brought about like a lot of emotion coming from a place that I always felt like I'm not queer enough, like I'm not enough, and I'm invisible. And in actuality, this game like really helped me bring my identity forward. And so it was a really special experience. And so like thank you all of you for playing, for GMing, for watching, for helping in the background. I really appreciate all of you.
Wonderful. Um, I am so glad that you guys supported my very cheesy names and went along with a plot of where you guys got to meet some interesting NPCs and you know the whole situation of the people in the building like vomiting, like that was a stress reflex, and I just wanted to like emphasize how stressed they were because the CEO was just so demanding, um just for demanding sakes, because quote, this is how we get things done. And that's it's not a type of philosophy that I like to aspire to. But you know, that was the quote bad guy in the story. So I hope you enjoyed my play on the capitalism. um, did Jesse, Menachem, did you guys have any other thoughts that you wanted to say about the game before we close out?
Thank you for giving me this opportunity to be a part of this and to play this game. It's been wonderful getting to know everyone, and I'm excited for all of the things we will have moving forward. And it's just been a great opportunity to explore all of these different parts of who we are and how we practice and what it is that we are trying to put out in the world.
I was thinking it was kind of fun and interesting that we picked a game that to me has a kind of a retro historical look at how queerness was manifesting in our country, like the codedness of it when we couldn't be as explicit as we are now. I mean, the 90s were fabulous and wonderful. We did great work then, but you know, TV shows are still coded, but now, so it was really cool to do like, here's our history. Now we're going to go to the explicitness as we move forward.
Fantastic. Awesome. So we have our checkout questions. And Punk Pride Pixies has been such a fun game. But you know, as with all games, sometimes it's time to like let it go and leave things on the table. So our checkout questions for today is, what is one quality of your character that you plan to take with you? And what is one quality of your character that you plan to leave at the table? Holly, are you ready to go first?
One time I wasn't. I kind of answered this a little bit, but one thing I want to take about my character is her confidence. But one thing I want to leave behind about my character is her apathy and boredness, because it's okay to be a nerd and really like things.
Absolutely. Maggie, would you like to go next?
Yeah. So one quality I'd like to take with me is her their bravery, I think. Bravery, even if it doesn't necessarily match exactly with their personality style type. And then one quality I'm going to leave at the table is the secret keeping. I don't like secret keeping, and it doesn't feel good to me. So, yeah.
Okay. Good, good. I love those. All right, Jesse.
Um, the one quality I want to take with me is the curiosity and the inquisitiveness and just wanting to learn and just be involved in life. And the one thing I want to leave at the table is just the randomness and chaos, because it's fun in small doses, but just doing things without thinking can lead to problems long term.
Absolutely. But in a game, it's okay.
Whatever.
All right, Manakam, you ready?
Yeah. The freedom to act without processing and choosing the words first, and to be a little obnoxious and silly and to be big and expressive, I'm going to take with me a little more. What I'm going to leave is the degree to which Commodity did those things, because that's, I don't have wings. I can't just fly away from danger.
In
All right.
cotton candy.
Fantastic. And I'm just gonna focus on Nellie since I played Nellie for the most time. I would say what I'd like to keep with me, the qualities I'd like to keep for Nellie, is her love of animals, particularly squirrels, and her friendly nature, and her love of like friendship and her other pixie friends. And what I'd like to leave on the table, I think I'm just gonna leave part of the nervousness, because nervousness can be helpful in many ways. So I don't want to lose all of it, but just a part of it, so that she's just a little bit more comfortable and um, a little bit calmer in her pixie self. All right. Okay, well, I feel like we've done a very good debrief of this game. What do you guys think? Yeah?
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank
So-
you so much. Yeah.
I was going to say thank you. I was going to say next week we'll be at Save, right? We're playing Mazes, and we are playing Chew, which is still in playtest, and the Kickstarter starts in like 36 hours. Chew is a game based on the comic book from Image Comics based on Chew, and Mazes is the polymorph system from Ninth Level Games, and Chew is by Pete Petruccia and Imagining Games. We'll be doing that, and then we'll be having a special edition of Gaze of Our Lives next Sunday, playing with Jamila. What's the name of the game?
Our Haunt.
Our Haunt.
Yes. And we'll put the links to those in the stream chat. So.
And then we'll be back here 2 weeks from now with Grand Guggenal.
Yeah. That's gonna be a completely different type of game. It definitely is not high fantasy. It's going to be more horror based. So we'll see. We'll see. Hopefully it's something that everyone enjoys, but it's still gonna be queer and
a different
beautiful.
cast of players.
Yep, that is true too.
Is anyone here in the game?
Yep.
I'm gonna be playing. Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
so a couple of us, couple friendly face or familiar faces and faces from the other game. I put the link to Grand Guggenal in the chat, and we'll also put the link for Choose and what was the other one? Our Haunt.
Our Haunt.
Our
Chew,
Haunt.
Our Haunt. I'll put them in there. Sorry.
So to be clear,
And-
choose. Go ahead, Maggie.
Oh, I was just gonna add that Our Haunt Kickstarter starts on the 12th.
Right, that was going to clarify. Chew is coming up
Yeah.
in like 36 hours. Haunt is next week.
Yeah. Well, thank you all for listening in. I hope you enjoyed the debrief, and we'll see you at the next Gaze of Our Lives. All right.